Namaste Vidyapeeth, खुश रहिए I JVN Muskan Kumari from the Department of Science and Technology and I'm working here as an assistant professor in JVWU Women's University and Faculty of Education and Methodology. So today I will discuss the session that's topic name is your clustering. What do you mean by the clustering? What is the uses of clustering? What are the basic advantages of clustering to use? Why it's required in today's in data science, isn't it? So we will discuss this topic in brief manners, and so to make you this topic very easily understanding, I just want to share the some files which helps you to better understand, isn't it? So please wait 1 minute. I'm just sharing that one. Yes. So here, see this one's yes. This is the basic overview of your clustering. What is the clustering and all the related subtopics to the clustering, isn't it? So what? Clustering. Clustering is basically a task of dividing the populations or data points. We are dividing the populations, and now you will say that what is the populations, isn't it? So the number of group of anything, see, or group of or bunch of anything is known as the cluster. Uh, Dividing that things we call the cluster, isn't it? So some set of a small set of groups of anything like peoples or anything, you are say that like this is a cluster, isn't it? So clustering is the task of dividing the populations or data points into the number of groups such that data points in the same groups are more similar to other data points in the same group than those in other groups. In simple way, the aim is to segregate groups with similar traits and assign them into the clusters. Now you just see that what this one is saying. This one is basically the main aim of the clustering is one. You are dividing a populations or the bunch of anything into the different subgroups, and that a subgroup is known as the formation of cluster, isn't it? And that formation of cluster is basically what containing the same characteristics of all elements in a cluster. All elements are considered the same type of characteristics, isn't it? And that characteristics is different to the another elements of other clusters. Clear? So this is the main basic motto of clustering is this one. Clustering is an unsupervised technique in which the set of the similar data points is grouped together to form a cluster. Isn't it? This is the I have already told you that there are two techniques which is used in the clusters or in the data science or so that is supervised and second one is the unsupervised. So clustering is an unsupervised technique in which set of similar data is grouped together to form a cluster, isn't it? So cluster is said to be good if the intra-cluster or data points within the same cluster similarly is high and the inter-cluster, the data points outside the cluster similarity is low. It means that what? Suppose you have formed a cluster, isn't it a cluster? And inside that cluster, you have put all the elements, and the maximum of elements which is inside the cluster has the same type of properties, has the same type of characteristics. Then this is known as a intra-cluster and cluster is said to be good. You can say that this cluster is very good Very good in the sense that intra-cluster, it means all the elements inside the cluster has maximum similar property, and inter-cluster, all the elements outside the cluster has minimum or low characteristics, similar characteristics and similar properties. Clear? So now, clustering could also be viewed as the data compression techniques in which the data points of a cluster can be treated as a group. And you can also say like that a cluster is just like also the data compression. Why? Because we are using the multiple data in a group, and that group's name is the clustering. So clustering is also known as a data compression techniques. So clustering is also the data segmentation because it partitions the data such as the group. And you can also say that the clustering is also may called as like the data compression and the data segmentation. Why we are calling the data segmentation? Because we are dividing a large group into the small subgroups, and that subgroups is defining as a cluster. And why data compression? Because a subgroup, all the elements of a subgroup is bind together and just give their name as a cluster. Okay. So let's understand this with an example. Suppose you are a head of the rental store and wish to understand preference of your customers to scale up your businesses. If it is possible for you to look at the details of each customer and devise unique strategies, business strategy for each one of them, definitely not, isn't it? Definitely not. But what you can do is to cluster all of your customers, say 10 groups based on their purchasing habits, and use a separate strategy for customers in which of these in each of these 10 groups, and this is what we are called the clustering. Suppose that you are a shopkeeper and there might you haven't this much enough capability like you can watch each and every customers in a day, whatever the customers are coming to your store to purchasing anything, isn't it? So if you see that a group of 7 and 10 persons are coming to your shop to purchasing the same type of the data items like isn't it the same grocery types data item, then you can think that yes, this 10 persons comes in week and per day to purchase these type of data items of grocery. So you can manage these types and boost your business also, isn't it? So now if we talk about the types of the clustering, what is the types of the clustering? There are two types of clustering, hard clustering, soft clustering. In hard clustering, each point either belongs to a cluster completely or not. For example, in the above example, each customer is put into one group of 10 groups. Clear? So in soft clustering, instead of putting each data point into a separate cluster, probability or likelihood of that data points to be those cluster is assigned. Now, if we talk about the, for example, you can see here, above scenario, each customer is assigned a probability to be either in the 10 cluster or retail stores. So, it's the better understanding to you, hard clustering, soft clustering. In hard clustering, each data point belongs to a cluster completely or not. It might be either that data is completely belongs to that cluster or not. So, but in soft clustering, is data point in a separate clusters, and the probability or likelihood of that data points to be those cluster is assigned. Now, if we talk about the how does differ from clustering, clustering how is different from the classification. You can also say that if we are talking about the clustering, this is also the similarity property like the classification, isn't it? So classification algorithm are good techniques to distinguish between groups and classify, and classification requires the manual labeling of data in which trial process when a disaster is used. Disaster not data set is used, isn't it? Suppose classification is that when you have a huge amount of the data, so you are just use the classification, apply the classification algorithm, and use the manual labeling of that data. But how about the reverse process, which partitioning the similar data points with their characteristics and properties together and assigning cluster label to them. So clustering algorithm doesn't require label to further proceed since it is an unsupervised technique. Clear? Now requirements, what will be the requirements for the clustering? First, scalability, potential to cope up with distinct attributes, robustness towards noise and outliers, and you can also say the capability to face high dimension dimensional data. So these 4 points are the basic requirements of the clustering. So and I hope that you all have understand this session very clearly. And if you have any problem regarding this session, then please let me know your query by using the comment section box. Then I will discuss your query in the next session with you. Okay, and please read this all the topics, whatever the session I have already completed with different standard books, and also use the online sites like Java Point, Geeks for Geeks, tutorial points, isn't it? So please, data analytics site, data science sites. Okay, so please be prepared all the sessions which is already completed with the approach by your own all the possibilities questions is also. So like some questions will arises from this session, like what do you mean by the data compression? Can we also call that data compression is the same as clustering, or data segmentation is also known as the clustering? So please make some points to clarify it. And what is the types of the clustering? Explain the hard clustering with an example. And how does clustering from the classification? How this is different from that classification? Explain it. What are will be the requirements for the clustering? These all questions will be arising. Okay, so I hope you understand it better. So be prepared with all the questions, and also read this session from multiple resources from where you will get the knowledgeable and informative uh, informations. Okay. Hmm. Okay.